After World War II, the victors literally redrew the map of the world. But for Germany, they did something kind of unthinkable. They actually tore it in two. So today, we're going to dive into how the end of one massive war set the stage for a new, colder one, right through the heart of Europe.
I mean, just think about it for a second. It's a really stark image, right? A single country, same history, same language, suddenly divided by a concrete wall. That's the big question we're tackling here. And the answer? Well, it reveals these incredibly powerful forces that reshaped our entire world for the next 50 years.
Okay, so to really get what happened to Germany, we first need to zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture. You see, the end of World War II wasn't just an ending. Nope, it was the beginning of a whole new kind of global conflict.
With the old powers of Europe basically in ruins, this huge power vacuum opened up, and two new superpowers rose to fill it, the United States and the Soviet Union. And the Soviets, they had this potent ideology they were absolutely determined to expand: communism. This one idea would go on to define the entire next half-century.
So while Europe was trying to get back on its feet, the Soviet Union didn't waste a single second expanding its influence. But how did this idea spread so fast? Well, it wasn't a one-size-fits-all plan. Communism actually arrived in different countries through some very distinct routes.
Essentially, it all boils down to three main ways this happened. You had outright military force, you had immense political pressure, and, in a few cases, you had a willing strategic alliance. Let's break those down.
All right, let's look at those first two paths. On one hand, you had countries like East Germany and North Korea. For them, communist rule was just imposed by force, a direct result of the war. But then you had places like Poland and Hungary, what became known as the Eastern Bloc, where it was more about immense pressure. The message from Moscow was pretty clear: fall in line or risk getting run over by the massive Soviet army right on your border.
And then you have this third path, the strategic alliance. For a country like Cuba, sitting right on the doorstep of the United States, teaming up with the USSR wasn't about being conquered. No, it was a calculated move. It was about gaining power and, frankly, protection from a government they saw as a major threat.
Okay, so now that we've got the global context, let's zoom right back into the nation at the absolute heart of this ideological collision: Germany.
Now, the division of Germany wasn't some accident. It was a direct, planned-out consequence of its defeat. It was designed by the Allies to make sure Germany could never, ever again threaten world peace. The terms of surrender were clear. Germany would be occupied and run by the victors. And how many victorious Allied powers were there? 4. So, the decision was made to carve Germany itself into 4 distinct zones of occupation. The US, the UK, and France took the western regions, and the Soviet Union took the east. And their approaches, well, they couldn't have been more different. The Western Allies, they were afraid of a power vacuum, so they quickly moved to set up a new democratic German government. The Soviets, though, they wanted a buffer zone against the West, so they imposed direct communist control.
And so, right away, while the Western zone started to rebuild as a single democratic state, the Eastern Soviet zone was put on a completely separate track. The Soviets installed a communist system by force, creating this separate, isolated reality for millions of German people. So, what did all this political maneuvering actually mean for the people living there? This is where those ideological lines on a map became hard, physical, and very, very real.
The separation was almost immediate. The Soviets started fencing off their entire region, literally cutting roads, railways, and whole communities in half. This was the physical creation of what Winston Churchill had famously called an Iron Curtain descending across Europe.
Of course, the ultimate symbol of this whole division was the Berlin Wall. Built in 1961, it became the most infamous part of this border, a mess of concrete and barbed wire that was the physical embodiment of the Cold War. And it was designed for one primary reason: to stop the citizens of communist East Germany from escaping to the democratic West.
The results of these two systems were just stark. West Germany, pumped up with Western aid and a free market economy, experienced what they called the Wirtschaftswunder, an economic miracle that turned it into a prosperous democracy. East Germany, meanwhile, under a rigid, centrally planned communist economy, just struggled. Shortages and stagnation became the norm.
But beyond all the politics and the economics, the deepest cut was the human one. This wasn't just about two states.
It was about people. Parents were cut off from their kids, brothers from sisters, friends from friends, for decades. An entire generation grew up with a wall running right through their families.
The Berlin Wall finally fell in 1989, and Germany was reunified. But that leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. When a physical barrier that has divided a people for decades is finally torn down, what invisible walls, in culture, in economics, in memory, what invisible walls are still left standing? It's a legacy that Germany and really the whole world is still grappling with today.